welcome to Broken Entertainment, and in today's news we learn that Amazon is completely out of its freaking mind. So Amazon, you may or may not know, is producing for Amazon Prime a TV show of Lord of the Rings. And it's going to be set thousands of years before the original series of books and movies, and that's all fine and good. There's some issues that we'll get into that have raised a lot of eyebrows among Lord of the Rings fans. But let's get into this first development that has just come out. This is according to Bell of Lost Souls. Amazon, so we've heard all kinds of rumors about the pricing, but get this. The first season, initial rumors put the first season at $100 to $150 million per season, with an overall rating or an overall price tag of $1 billion, give or take. We have learned these rumors are way off. The price tag of the first season is $465 million for one season of television. $465 million for one season. You're never making this back. Unless this is the greatest television show to ever be produced in the history of the universe, you're not making back $465 million in one season. Because you got to figure the second season is going to cost at least $465 million, probably more. And to put that into perspective, the most expensive movie ever made, Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides, $412 million. It's more expensive than the most expensive movie ever made. I mean, just let that kind of sink in, because these movies, okay, with that kind of price tag, usually don't make their money back either, and they're movies. This is a streaming television show on a service that not everybody has, okay, and not everybody's a Lord of the Rings fan, and you're paying $465 million for your first season. You're out of your mind. Even if you do make it back, think of how much work and time has to go into making that money back. And then extrapolate it out over however many seasons. And now imagine if it's bad. You know, not Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones made a bunch of money. And it had a high budget for its time. But it's nothing compared to this. And it failed miserably. It fell apart. And the fans, by and large, completely hate the way it ended and won't buy the DVDs, won't watch the reruns. And a lot of people dropped their subscriptions for HBO when it came out because the last season was that bad. And at the heart of my concern about this, other than the ridiculous price tag, I mean, $465 million. $365 million more than the first season of Game of Thrones, and $150 million more than the cost of Peter Jackson's entire Lord of the Rings trilogy. You know, these people are nuts. Okay? They're just nuts. Let's spend the most money ever on a production. And to top it off, you have J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay. They've never run a TV show. They've never written a TV show. And they're running the whole thing. They've never even run a movie. Their script was tossed out for Star Trek Beyond. Then they're supposed to be writing Star Trek 4, and that fell through. And they're connected to Bad Robot. And if you're not familiar with Bad Robot, that's J.J. Abrams' studio. And everything that has touched has fallen apart. Star Trek fell apart. The Star Trek TV show is terrible, and that's also connected to Bad Robot through subsidiaries. Star Wars, Star Trek, Lost. It's all falling apart. And you're going to take people from Bad Robot who have never been successful, and you're going to put them in charge of a $465 million a season TV show. What? And then you've got all the issues that have come out. Okay, I'll give you the description first of the show. This is the official one. Forthcoming series brings to screen for the very first time the heroic legends of the fabled Second Age of Middle-earth history. The epic drama is set thousands of years before the events of J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. It will take viewers back to an era in which great powers were forged, kingdoms rose to glory, and fell to ruin. Unlikely heroes were tested, hope hung by the finest of threads, and the greatest villain that ever flowed from Tolkien's pen threatened to cover all the world in darkness. Beginning in a time of relative peace, the series follows an ensemble cast of characters, both familiar and new, as they confront the long-feared reemergence of evil to Middle-earth. From the darkest depths of the Misty Mountains to the majestic forests of the elf capital of Lindon, to the breathtaking island kingdom of Numenor, to the furthest reaches of the map, these kingdoms and characters will carve out legacies that live long after they are gone. Couple of concerns. This sounds a lot like Game of Thrones, and that's not what you want. Game of Thrones is dark. Game of Thrones is postmodern. Game of Thrones is nobody is out to do good. Okay? Lord of the Rings is about hope. It's about good people doing hard things. It's about light in darkness. And this doesn't read that way. It reads like Game of Thrones. And we know as well that Jeff Bezos, who owns Amazon, went out and said, I want, before they started all this, bring me Game of Thrones. Do you want Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings? I don't want Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings should be about heart, it should be about hope, it should be about light. It cannot be postmodern. It cannot be cynical. Or it fails. And you've got $465 million for the first season. And then, because it just keeps getting there. We now know as well, and this is from a couple months ago, but Amazon Studios' Lord of the Rings series heads into uncharted carnal waters with casting call for nudity and an intimacy coordinator. That is not Lord of the Rings. That's Game of Thrones. Lord of the Rings doesn't go there. It's not what it's about. It would be like Star Wars going there. Star Wars doesn't go there. It's not that it doesn't exist in the setting. Obviously it does. But that's not where the story goes. You have some great love stories in Lord of the Rings, and they never go there. But this is the modern thing. But that's not Lord of the Rings. It isn't. It's not what Tolkien wrote. And very specifically, not what Tolkien wrote. Lord of the Rings is not rated R. Lord of the Rings is not adult intimacy. That's not what Lord of the Rings is about. But we're going to have a bunch of drama. We're going to have because there's a lot of second age information, but there's not a whole lot there in terms of story, because those aren't books we're talking about. We're talking about information gleaned from notes and the Silmarillion. It's not like the Lord of the Rings movie trilogy where you have 3 books plus The Hobbit, plus notes. There's no dialogue written. There's no any of that in place. So they got to fill it in. And what do modern Hollywood creators fill stuff in with? Darkness, nudity, and extreme violence. That's what they know now. And that's what they're going to fill it in with. More concerning, perhaps, than anything, Tom Shippey was on the creative team, which is good, because Tom Shippey is essentially the Lord of the Rings guru. He is the guy that, as this article says, for many fans, Shippey is the iron rock that would ensure Amazon maintains fidelity to Tolkien. Well, it sounds like now he's out. And this is a recap in a lot of ways of some other news, but I want to put this into perspective. $465 million, showrunners that have never run a show in their life and have never written anything successful in their life, actors from all across the board, some of them with experience, some of them have never done anything. One of them is from Power Rangers Megaforce. Okay, $465 million, no Tom Shippey, sex and nudity, and darkness. If they go the Game of Thrones route, this will be a complete fiasco. You will lose every Lord of the Rings fan. The only people you'll get are people that don't really pay attention to Lord of the Rings, and they may have saw one of the movies like once or something, and they've heard about it, but they're just going to go watch the TV show, and they don't know any better, so, it's okay if it's like Game of Thrones, because Game of Thrones was cool. They watched that for like a whole 3 seasons or something. That's the kind of person that would stick with it. The people that know and love Lord of the Rings, if you give them nudity and darkness and intimacy coordinators, and you stray from the core precepts of Tolkien, they're going to shut it off, and they're going to go nuts. And for good reason. We have watched franchise after franchise after franchise go down this same route. Star Trek has this kind of crap in it now. You have baby killings now in Star Trek. You have people getting their eyes torn out in Star Trek now. You have Game of Thrones that decided to go woke and collapse. If they go this route and they spend $465 million on the first season, even if it's good, where do they get the money back? This is crazy. This is absolutely nuts. I don't know if it's going to be horrible and dark, but it sounds that way. It's moving in that direction. More importantly to me is you have 2 people running this that have never done it before. And it is based on a small amount. Well, not a terribly small amount, but it's based on the Silmarillion and notes. It is not a novel. It is not a series of novels. It is not a fleshed out, fully written story. And you got these guys coming in, and you give them $465 million. Why? This is throwing money at something and trying to replicate the success, temporary success, of another show. Because you want to be the biggest and the best. Instead of doing the groundwork and earning that status by building up from ground level, having a great first season and going from there. This is the kind of thing that you start small and build big. You can in on $465 million with huge epic scale battles and all this stuff. But you gotta get there. And you're starting there, which means it's only gonna get more expensive as the story progresses. I think they're out of their mind. I think this is just trying to buy a blockbuster, essentially. They're throwing all this money at it because they think, well, we got to catch up to HBO and Game of Thrones. Well, Game of Thrones failed. That's how long this has been in development, by the way. They started this before Game of Thrones fell apart. This is, I think, the first information started coming out around 2017. So, it's been in development forever, and that's rarely a good sign. We'll see where it goes. I obviously feel this is impending disaster. And all of the signs we have point in that direction. But I hope not. I love Lord of the Rings. I'd love to see it succeed. If it doesn't, if it's a disaster, if it's full of a bunch of man bad, woman good, modern bullcrap, and a bunch of politics and orange man bad and all that crap, because, look where this was all written. If it's full of all that usual garbage, I'm going to throw it out. But I've got the books and the movies, and you can't take that away. And I think part of the problem that I would worry about if I were Amazon is exactly that. The hardcore Lord of the Rings fans already have Lord of the Rings. This is interesting. Kind of want to see where it goes, right? You might be hoping for the best, and it could be really good. But it's not the core story you're concerned with. You already have that. This is a prequel. At the end of the day, it's $465 million for one season of a prequel. So we'll see where it goes. I suspect early on it will have really high numbers. I think you're going to have a lot of people that are curious. I think you're going to have a lot of what we call normies who don't follow this stuff that are going to come in, they're going to watch it because they want to know what's going on. And probably a lot of people that don't know Lord of the Rings who are going to come in thinking, oh, they're doing like Lord of the Rings but on TV. Not realizing that it's actually a completely different part of the timeline of Lord of the Rings. And I hope deeply that my gut feeling on this is wrong, but boy, you get rid of the guy that makes sure that everything sticks to Tolkien. Tolkien's son dies, so the guy that's in charge of Tolkien's estate and who has guarded Tolkien's works for so long is gone. You have two showrunners that have never done anything. You have $465 million budget. You have actors pulled out of Power Rangers and who have never worked a day in their life on anything significant. And you're trying to replicate Game of Thrones. That's a lot of flags. I'm just saying. It's a lot of flags. I worry about it. We'll see where it goes. But I'm with Gary on Nerdrotic. He has a great video on this subject as well. I'll put that in the description below. I'm with Nerdrotic on this. I'm real worried. But more than that, $465 million, show me where you make that back. Explain to me how you make $465 million budget for one season of a TV show that you'd ideally have running 10 seasons. Remember, that doesn't get cheaper because it starts out small and gets big. Okay? The Second Age storyline starts out pretty peaceful and ends up in apocalyptic battles. This is not going to get cheaper. So I just don't understand how they expect to make this back. More expensive than the most expensive movie ever made. And more expensive than the most expensive TV show ever made by a lot. So I just don't get it. I don't get it. But let me know what you think. If you think it's going to be good, if you're worried about it, what you think of them spending $1 bazillion to make one season in the comments down below. If you liked the video, please hit the like button. If you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing. Hit the bell for notifications, and I will see you next time.